Caught my ex-best friend with my girlfriend. He blackmailed me, so I signed him up for gay porn and got him fired. Revenge served cold. I apologize for the title. I am not particularly skilled at crafting them. I'm a gay man, though it took me quite a while to fully accept that part of myself. During the period when I was grappling with my sexuality, I was dating someone I believed to be a wonderful girl. I will refer to her as Jane. I truly loved her and envisioned a future for us, as we had been together for 3 years and were getting quite serious, even though we were only 18 when he separated us. You all understand what young love can be like. Anyway, the other key figures in this narrative are my former best friend James and my truly remarkable boyfriend Alex. Just to clarify, those are not their real names. Additionally, this is a lengthy read, so I apologize for that. I tend to ramble, and I am not the best writer, so I apologize if this is somewhat lacking. James and I had been friends since around the age of 10 or 11, growing so close that we felt more like brothers than best friends. He was very supportive of my relationship with Jane and often expressed how pleased he was that she made me happy. However, reflecting on it now, I realize he had a tendency to constantly comment on how beautiful she was, how attractive she was, and how fortunate I was to be with her. I understood the last remark, but he was excessively complimentary about Jane's looks. At the time, I was young and naive. I did not think much of it. That was until I caught them together. I am not the best storyteller, but essentially, I noticed they were becoming quite secretive about their phones. They would often disappear, claiming to feel ill or needing to finish some project. I know it sounds foolish, but I also began to notice that the condoms I had been buying were going missing. I always liked to ensure we had enough for safety. One day, I decided to visit Jane's house after she canceled our plans, saying she had a migraine. I was partially concerned for her well-being and brought some painkillers, snacks, and bottled water in case she truly was ill. However, I also had a deep-seated suspicion that she was not being truthful. I cannot quite explain it, but I just knew. Sure enough, when I let myself in with the spare key she had given me, I found her in bed with James. I was devastated. 2 people that I cared for more than anyone else in the world and who I believed cared for me betrayed my trust like this. I was furious. We had a massive argument, with Jane pleading for me to hear her out while James yelled at me, which eventually led to me storming out. I wanted to inform everyone about what they had done and hold them accountable. But that was where the trouble began. Remember how I mentioned that I was questioning my sexuality? James was aware of this fact. Of course, he knew I would never leave Jane to pursue casual relationships with numerous guys, but he was keenly aware that I had come to understand my attraction to both genders. It was more a matter of Jane in particular, as I no longer felt any attraction toward women. He exploited this knowledge against me. He knew how frightened I was of my parents disowning me, and he constantly reminded me that if I mentioned anything to anyone, they would find out. At the time, this was genuinely terrifying, although I now know they completely accept me and love me. So I remained silent. I was stuck working with James at his father's garage, unable to devise a way to express my anger toward him without revealing what he had done and risking being outed to my parents. Moreover, I needed the money, and there were not many other job opportunities available to me. Additionally, I should mention that James actively harassed me at work, hurling slurs at me whenever he could, shoving me around, and generally reminding me that he could disclose my secret to my parents at any moment. I fell into a deep depression during this time, and the only moments when I felt somewhat at ease and could truly be myself were when I visited local gay bars. There was one club in particular that I loved, a drag venue, where I met my boyfriend Alex. He performed as a drag queen there and often assisted behind the bar when needed. For clarity, I will use him pronouns for him, although they do change while he is in drag. We flirted for a few weeks before gradually becoming friends with benefits. He is an incredible person, and I know it might sound cliché, but I was the happiest I had ever been when he agreed to be my boyfriend. But that is a bit ahead in the story. This revenge unfolded before we started officially dating, when we were still merely friends who occasionally hooked up. After a few months, I finally gathered the courage to confide in Alex about what transpired with Jane and James, and that is when a wicked smile spread across his face. You see, Alex is the sweetest person you could ever meet, but if you anger him, he can and will become a mastermind of clever revenge. At this time, James had been bragging about how much the ladies adored him and that he could have any girl he desired, which I highly doubted. He had always been somewhat boastful, but he intensified his bragging to try to irritate me. He also claimed that any girl I dated would leave me instantly for him. So, Alex proposed that we put that theory to the test, and thus began the act of revenge. We started off subtly. James had given me his email address a few years back, and as I suspected, he had not bothered to change it. I decided to be rather generous and sign him up for a premium subscription to several gay adult websites, while also agreeing to receive email notifications about new offers and other things he may find interesting, just to be kind and ensure he had some variety. Oh, did I fail to mention this was the address he allowed his father to use? Oops. It cost me quite a bit of money, but I ensured he received all the best deals. Alex was more than willing to contribute to help me. It was worth every penny. While we were working at the garage, his father barged in and demanded to speak with him. Now, his father did not care about his son's sexual orientation, but he was horrified that James would order so much adult content and use their shared email address. He genuinely believed for months that James was a sex addict. We might have signed him up for more subscriptions than we initially anticipated. After the first 2 weeks of his subscriptions, I logged into the email and discovered he had received over 100 notifications about his accounts. This was when, as we anticipated, James began acting more aggressively. He would shove me, sabotage my work to provoke me, and send me vile messages while also issuing threats and insults to my face. I kept meticulous records of everything. I maintained a notebook to document the dates and times of each incident, along with detailed descriptions of his actions, including every insult and threat. I took screenshots of all his messages and recorded every verbal attack he directed at me on my phone. Alex assisted me in organizing all of this into files, which we then saved onto a hard drive. This would be significant later. After gathering everything, we decided it was time to implement the next phase of our plan, introducing a fake girlfriend. And no, not Jane. It is also worth mentioning that he and Jane broke up only weeks after I discovered their affair. They were never meant to last. Alex is exceptionally convincing in drag. Being feminine already makes it a bit easier for him. His voice is not particularly deep, allowing him to occasionally pass for a girl with a slightly lower vocal tone. He typically amplifies his makeup and clothing, but for this stage of our plan, we opted for a more natural look. A mutual friend of ours generously lent Alex some of her clothes for the ruse. We created a fake Facebook profile for my new girlfriend, and Alex and I posted some adorable couple pictures on both this account and my personal Facebook profile, sharing all the usual affectionate content typical of couples on social media before putting our scheme into motion. Alex would come by to pick me up from work a few days each week, dressed as an extraordinarily attractive young woman, if I do say so myself. We would engage in conversation, hold hands, hug, kiss, and generally behave like a couple. James, of course, took notice. He took the bait and began conversing with Alex while waiting for me to finish my shift, eventually sending a friend request to Alex's account, which Alex promptly accepted. After a few weeks of discussing work, school, television series, and music, James slowly began to steer his conversations with Alex into more suggestive territories, precisely what we were hoping for. Alex responded accordingly. He attempted to send Alex explicit images, hoping for reciprocation, but we deleted those immediately, deciding that would be crossing a line even for a person like him. This continued for several weeks until we had everything in position. Alex made sure to take screenshots of the conversations, and then we changed the name on the Facebook account to Alex's real name and removed the couple's photos from it. I sent the screenshots from the conversations with Alex to James's friends. They were generally supportive and often called out James when he acted like a jerk, enjoying the opportunity to mock him for this situation. The expression on James's face when his friends referred to his little boy toy was absolutely unforgettable. I am unsure he will ever live that down. The individuals he previously bullied at school even retorted that he was the one sexting another guy, so how could he have the nerve to label them with derogatory terms? This infuriated him greatly as he recognized they were correct, even if he was unaware that Alex was a male at the time. James, predictably, responded as expected and began bombarding Alex with abusive messages and threats, only further strengthening our case, as we had screenshotted every communication and added it to the folders on the hard drive. Once I felt we had gathered sufficient evidence, I approached James's father, who was also my and James's employer, and detailed everything that had occurred, from the infidelity with Jane to the harassment and threats. He sat quietly, listening intently as I presented the evidence I had compiled. He found the petty revenge involving Alex in drag somewhat amusing, but for the rest of the time, his expression remained neutral, albeit with a flicker of anger in his eyes. He thanked me for sharing the information and left to speak with his son. James was terminated on the spot. I agreed not to involve the police, as this could potentially lead to negative publicity for his father's business, and his father was a genuinely decent man. I knew James was all talk, so there was no real danger in that situation. Additionally, I received a glowing reference from James's father for a job I was eager to secure, which I eventually obtained, likely benefiting from the reference. James's parents exploded with anger upon learning the news. They refused to reinstate his job and insisted he go out and earn one through actual effort. He had grown accustomed to skating by since his father owned the business and naively believed he couldn't really be terminated. They also sold the car he had been using and told him he would need to purchase a new one with his own funds. It took him nearly 2 years to save enough money to acquire a new vehicle. Eventually, news of James and Jane's affair leaked, concerning his threats to out me. Alex kindly reminded James that he had absolutely no proof of me engaging in any reckless behavior, while all his friends were aware of the explicit messages James had sent him again, another male. It would ultimately appear that he was merely retaliating due to some petty revenge. James's father also assured me that my secret was safe with him, making the threats of blackmail effectively non-existent. James gained admission to college on a scholarship and began associating with a different group of malcontents. I learned through a mutual friend that James remained a homophobic person in college and was bullying a few LGBT students while also issuing vile threats against a lesbian girl in his class. However, none of them were willing to report him. Why? Because James had been deceiving them, claiming his father held a significant position within the college's administration or something. I was not paying close attention and cannot remember precisely who he alleged his father was, but it was enough to instill fear in these unfortunate individuals that they might face expulsion from college for speaking out against him. I decided to intervene. With the help of our mutual friend, I forwarded a collection of the repugnant screenshots, recordings of some of his threats, and certain homophobic, racist, and sexist posts he had shared on his Facebook account, which he had deleted before the college could access it to the college administration. They were outraged upon reviewing what they found. Eventually, they rescinded his scholarship after several students, encouraged by our efforts, reported the harassment and threats. I genuinely have no idea how he became such a person. His parents are exceptionally kind, open-minded individuals. It is quite baffling. Following that incident, James's parents booted him out of their home. He crashed with his friends for a few months before managing to find an apartment. The last I heard, he was working in a fast food establishment, striving to gain admission to another college. I sincerely hope he has made positive changes in his life. After all, everyone is capable of transformation, right? I should clarify that I did not harbor much interest in exacting revenge on Jane. While she did engage in infidelity, my primary target was James for the blackmail and threats that came after the affair. Jane had provided evidence that she attempted to persuade James to stop threatening me and urged him to simply let it go. If they had both just ceased communicating with me after the affair, none of this would have transpired. Although I would have felt hurt and perhaps a bit uncomfortable at work, I would not have gone out of my way to retaliate against him. However, I did inform Jane's mother about the true events and shared screenshots where Jane admitted to the affair. This was after I discovered she had told her mother that I was the one who had cheated with multiple men and women, rather than the "we just grew apart" narrative we had collectively decided to tell our families. From what I gathered, her mother was quite displeased with her. I also shared several of the texts where she acknowledged her infidelity with her new boyfriend. Needless to say, he was far from thrilled to learn that his abusive ex was merely an ex who had been unfaithful. From what I understand, they are still together, so all I can say to that gentleman is, good luck. I ultimately came out to my parents, and they were surprisingly supportive, which was wonderful. Alex and I became a couple 1 to 2 years after these events, and we remain very much in love. I apologize if this does not qualify as a classic revenge story, but some of my friends suggested I share it here. I am aware that there may be several spelling errors, and the narrative could seem somewhat disjointed, but I am not particularly proficient at writing, so my apologies. Story 2. I set up my info booth, faced a woman with a dementia diagnosis, and was interrupted by a teen demanding vapes. Chaos ensued. I will begin with an apology, as I must address a few housekeeping matters before launching into this post. To start, this serves as a follow-up to an earlier post, which should hopefully be linked here. https www.reddit.com I don't work here lady comments 1 clickses that's not really why I'm here, and I will leave a note in the comments if the link fails to function. Moreover, it has been observed that my writing style is notably more leisurely and whimsical than most entries found here. Consequently, this will be lengthy, and I cannot assure you of a satisfying conclusion that you rightfully deserve. This narrative is more focused on the journey rather than the destination. I apologize if this does not meet your expectations. Lastly, given the relevance to the narrative, I will address some topics that may be challenging or distressing. If you have any inquiries, I am more than willing to assist and direct you to appropriate support resources. Never endure suffering in silence. Reach out, and things can only improve. For those who have stayed, I shall proceed. For my information booth, I was provided with a location in the entrance foyer. In fact, a specific area had been thoughtfully carved out of their potted plant arrangement, complete with a table and sufficient space for my small tent. I had automatic double doors on my right, and a vast view of the supermarket stretching as far as one could see to the left, or at least to the produce aisle. Every time I stepped out of my tent, I felt like proclaiming, "Today, I have mostly been assisting individuals with their needs." As a side note, I recognize that this reference might be a bit obscure. Please look up Jessia's diets for context, and I truly hope it brightens at least one person's day. This setup is excellent for visibility, though less so for engaging in detailed discussions about intricate medical, disability, and care requirements. It is even more challenging for keeping pop-up banners standing. Each time the door swung open, it inevitably resulted in a clang, with one or another banner gracefully yet noisily toppling to the ground. The remedy is string. String attached to every conceivable service to create tension, such that instead of collapsing, they sway and wobble but never fall. Imagine Spider-Man with an involuntary twitch. Once fully set up, I awaited whatever may come my way, and I was occupied. Extremely occupied. Queries ranged from how to obtain training for personal care to legal arrangements concerning medical and financial matters, to compassionate individuals sharing their deepest secrets in the hopes of discovering a miracle that might alleviate their suffering. It is a tremendous privilege to hold this role, and while there is no miraculous solution, there are pathways to begin making lives more manageable and to break free from negative thought patterns to uncover rewards in tragic situations. After 2 hours of continuous activity, the crowd diminished, and apart from a few interested glances, peace had returned to my little corner. Enter the first of our key characters. No more than 17 or 18 years old, this young man, sporting dubious fashion choices, had been observing from a distance. We will refer to him as the player. Simultaneously, a woman in her late 40s or early 50s was lingering nearby. Unfortunately, experience has taught me one thing: like an asteroid on a radial elliptic course, when they finally reach their target, it will likely be something devastating. We shall call her Miss Timid. Miss Timid, excuse me, are you the representative from the charity? Representative, yes, indeed I am. How may I assist you today? Miss Timid, I would like some additional information. An uncomfortable silence follows. Representative, what specific information are you seeking? Miss Timid, I just want to know what my options are. Representative, no problem. Would you like to step into the tent and have a conversation? Miss Timid, no, I don't want to impose. I simply need to understand my options. Representative, why don't you share what you hope to achieve, and we can get the discussion started? After a significant pause. Miss Timid, I cared for my mother, who had dementia, for 15 years. It consumed my time with my children, ended my marriage, and left me rebuilding my life. I have just received a diagnosis of the same dementia and don't want my children to go through this, so I would like to know my options for the future. The player, hey dude, can you tell me where the vaporizers are? At that moment, my mind was racing. Miss Timid was not timid at all but clearly ensnared in a post-diagnosis fog. This was potentially the most devastating news of her life, and her options could lead down a very dark path swiftly. I needed to determine timelines, points of contact, and whether this was a medical and psychological emergency. This was my moment to step up and fulfill the role I thought I could play. The last thing on my mind was pondering vaporizers. I ought to have handled this more effectively. Representative, please, come into my little area. We cannot discuss this here. The player, dude, seriously, where are the vapes? Representative, I have no idea. Please ask the information desk. The player, no, I'm asking you. Do your job and take me to them. Representative, listen, I need to attend to this matter. Kindly find something else to do. I began to half guide, half push Miss Timid into the tent. The player, why is she more important than me? You can assist her later. Just take me to the vapes. Representative, I snapped back, somewhat harshly. Listen, mate. I do not know. I do not actually work here. So kindly leave me alone. The player, what did you say to me? Finally getting Miss Timid seated, I turned to confront the player who was glaring at me. The player, I asked, what did you say to me? Representative, I said, leave me alone. The player's demeanor shifted. Aimlessly wandering around my stand, I may not appear very large or imposing. To be fair, I am not most of the time. I'm certainly not very tall. However, I am quite broad. I possess a width that only feels appropriate when standing beside the front row of a rugby team or in the operatic section of a national performance. No one really notices until I'm challenged, and then it becomes clear. This is perhaps aided by a misguided past, which allows me to still back it up when absolutely necessary. The player decided that now was the moment to conclude that this was not the best idea and turned to flee. I hastily dove into the tent and began gathering the essential information in the most sensitive manner possible. As a side note, I have spent a considerable amount of time determining whether I should do more to anonymize Miss Timid or obscure the severity of her situation. Unfortunately, I am confident in my belief that this is becoming so common that Miss Timid is unidentifiable, which has also led me to feel the need to highlight the harsh reality of her circumstance. Perhaps 5, or maybe 10 minutes into my time in the tent, it's quite challenging in such a scenario to keep track of time. I heard the unmistakable sound of change being disturbed in a jar. Oh dear. In my rush, I had completely forgotten to remove the donation tin from the table. As I emerged, I found 5 identical teenage girls, resembling Karens, standing with the player, who was positioned between them. His entourage was guarding their prince. Go on, you didn't think I would truly title a story like this if they weren't the main event. The group of girls bore an eerie resemblance to one another. All had long, straight, dyed blonde hair and were dressed in matching tracksuits in pink, purple, or red. Their makeup routines reminded me of the ghostly figure from Scream. However, I have been assured by more fashionable acquaintances that this was the pinnacle of contemporary fashion, and who am I to claim that Edward Munch's, the Scream, shouldn't be a trendsetter once again? Karen 1, who do you believe you are? Karen 2, yeah, he's our guy, they chant in unison. Karen 1, we are going to make your life miserable. Karen 3, what do you think you are anyway? Some sort of pretender doctor, you aren't legitimate. Karen 2, yeah, you're a phony, right? They chant in unison. Karen 4, yeah, you are taking money from the charity, aren't you? What will you do if we take it away? I attempted a truly half-hearted effort to snatch it back, but it was out of my grasp embarrassingly early as I reached for thin air. Karen 1, are you trying to grab us too? Are you a weirdo? They chant in unison. Karen 4, I bet you engage in all sorts of inappropriate behavior in there, pointing at the tent. Karen 2, yeah, you pretend to be something you're not while you are actually just stacking shelves. Karen 1, you are nothing more than an old busboy. I'm not sure what this means or if I misheard it. It did stand out as a rather peculiar insult. Representative, please hand over the charity tin. The player, you're not so tough now, are you? Afraid of some girls. They are going to make your life miserable. They chant in unison. For the second time that day, I felt ensnared in an overwhelming situation and was anxiously weighing my options. Hopefully, the commotion would draw the attention of security or actual staff. However, what were the odds they would disregard rowdy teens as a general rule? What if they actually did attack? Miss Timid was in the tent and completely exposed. My primary responsibility was her care, and I could not place her in harm's way. Should I abandon my position to make myself more vulnerable to save her, or should I use the table in front of me as a barrier? Despite their numbers, engaging in a physical altercation with teenagers was unlikely to portray me in a positive light. I had resigned myself to the loss of the money. That would be frustrating but manageable for the greater good. I needed to make the clever choice, and time was slipping away. Scrape, twang, crash, scream. One of the girls had leveraged all her weight to shove the table toward me. I felt some pressure but little else. However, the string had not withstood the impact. Twanging away from the supports, the force knocked both pop-up banners down simultaneously onto 3 of the group. The final sound was the collective scream of fright and perhaps even a little pain as the banners collapsed upon them. All 6 fled, money tin in hand. The player led the way courageously, much like a great general retreating from the battlefield before the warriors on the front line. Unfortunately for them, they had triggered the attention of security, who quickly and easily apprehended them in their futile attempt to escape. The girls and their leader were escorted back to my information table as Charlie made an appearance. "Charlie representative, what is happening? Are you all right? The player, this guy, tried to sexually harass my friends. Karen too, yeah, he was all over us." They chant in unison. "Charlie, you are aware that we have cameras, right? I mean, look, you can see yourselves in them now." Representative, I let out a hearty laugh as the group looked instantly deflated. "Could I have my charity tin back, please?" Karen 4, what tin? Charlie using his radio. "Can we request the manager and contact the police, please?" Karen 1, what? No police. Charlie, you took the charity tin. Karen 1, but we never exited the store. You can't steal if you don't leave the premises. Representative, it's mine. More accurately, it belongs to the charity. Turning to Charlie, I have to press charges. I apologize. Charlie, why apologize? Representative, this is simply a nuisance. At this moment, I felt a wave of panic, realizing I hadn't checked on Miss Timid. I pulled Charlie aside, explained the situation, and returned to address the initial issue. Shortly after, a heavy-set man stormed into the supermarket, visibly upset. Eventually, he approached me with the player following him, appearing quite chastised. "Heavy-set man, Mr. Representative, how are you?" Representative, I'm fine. "How is your mother-in-law?" Heavy-set man, she is out of the hospital and beginning to recover. The surgery is holding, but not remembering she had it means we are tag-teaming sleep shifts. Representative, you need to consider how sustainable that is. Heavy-set man, I know. Turns to the player. Apologize. The player mumbles an apology, then turns away and heads back the way he came. Representative air. Heavy-set man, that's my son. He's only 15, so we received a call. They are reportedly figuring out what actions to take and who did what. Representative, I'm sorry. Heavy-set man, it's his fault. He sighed and strolled away. As it turned out, all of them were under 16. After some discussions between myself, the supermarket, the police, and the parents, it was determined that a significant donation, a store ban, and a final warning would suffice. Unfortunately, the heavy-set man's mother-in-law passed away not long afterward, and last I heard, they had not encountered any further issues with the player. I visited Charlie last year and will be returning later this year. Miss Timid was searching for care home alternatives and did not wish to inform her children of her condition. I was able to reassure and persuade her to communicate with her family about what was on the horizon. She is currently settled and stable in an assisted living facility, still working, and her dementia has not progressed as rapidly as anticipated. And this concludes this rather epic tale. Final observations: the words presented here are as true to my memory as possible. Where I may have forgotten exact phrasing, I have attempted to find suitable alternatives to retain the tone and sentiment while keeping an eye on making it entertaining. If you are affected by any content presented here, please do seek assistance. Inquire here. Reach out to a friend or family member. Approach a charitable organization or a faith-based group. Do not endure alone. I will be watching and will strive to support.